Hello and good evening. I will call to order this evening's North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District Advisory Committee meeting. So today is Wednesday, November 13th, and it's a little after 5:30. Thanks for bearing with me. I thought I would have a few words from the dais, but I think that just I'm glad that we're all here and I'm glad we're working together. We can do tough things, and I'm glad that we're here to collaborate together. And I'll just kind of leave it there. So all that takes us to our action items, and we have before us the approval of the meeting summary from September and October. So that was.
Do we need a motion?
If we're ready to approve those, yes, please.
I move that we approve the minutes from September and October.
Second. Any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, we'll approve the minutes. Well, we can take a vote. Can we take a vote? Yeah, I think we're good to go ahead and approve those. Thank you. Our next action item is support of the naming policy. That policy is also in our packet, and we have the slide deck from Melina that we talked about last meeting.
I'm going to pass out the policy and the procedures.
Okay.
And do you want to go to that as I'm just make sure? Would you want to just get some?
Oh, so I'm talking with Director Selly, and since I don't have my notes with me, yes, please, I would love to invite you to come to the dais.
Okay.
And that way you can answer any questions or give us a refresher. We had a pretty good presentation last time, but because the policy wasn't in our packet, then it got pushed to this meeting. So we're talking about something that we talked a little bit about last month. I see that Grover, you have your tag up. Do you want to start with
I'll wait to the presentation.
Okay, sounds good. So it's queuing up Grover and then Sheila, and then we can it might be answered.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kia Selly. I am the NCPRD District Director. And this evening, I'm here for Melina because she's out ill today. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not going to repeat the presentation that she did last week. It is in your packets, that PowerPoint presentation that is, but I do want to call your attention to additional documents that were put into your packet that you all requested at the last meeting. And this is the short documents, the policy. It's very high level. And then the second document is it's the procedures and guidelines. And I would look at the procedures and guidelines. This is really where we have outlined the naming categories, which begin on page 2. And just to list those, since we're on video: geographic special features, historic, indigenous or cultural, native flora and fauna, and outstanding individuals and community organizations, and businesses. And the last one, the business category is pursuant to the sponsorship policy. So I just want to call that out. I also want to note that the process steps are on page 3, starting with section 4. And the first step is NCPRD basically notifies the community that there is this naming opportunity. Step 2 is we receive those names from naming proposals from the community. Step 3 is the preparation of submissions. So basically NCPRD staff will collect and review all those proposed submittals to ensure alignment with the naming policy. And then the step 4 is the naming committee gets together and they review all of those proposals. And And then a recommendation is made to the NCPRD Board of Directors at step 5. And I want to just be clear that the Board of Directors can accept the committee recommendation or they can review other submissions. There's some flexibility there, of course, for the board. And then last step is NCPRD communicates out that named decision. So that's just a brief overview of that procedures and guidelines document. So I just wanted to run through that quickly. I'm assuming you all have taken a look at it since it was in your packets. So I'm happy to take any questions.
So. Go ahead, Sheila. Okay, so I had a question about step 1 and step 2 and how they work together. Because when I read step 2, I thought, well, 30 days, that's not very long. But then when I read step 1, public notification, so how long is that public notification step? If I don't know if I'm asking this correctly, you know, that, I mean, is the public notification happen and then does that start the 30 days or is there a timeline for?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, it kicks off the 30 days. And this is not keep in mind that, if we feel like we need to extend that time frame, we could extend that time frame, but, there are some situations where we're not going to want to extend this time frame for too long because, for example, the Concord property projects, construction's well underway, and we need to actually start fabricating signage so that we can install it and open up that site for the fall reopening in 2025. So there are some practical considerations in terms of timing. But yes, generally that would be the timing. And then we would do this mass notification, solicit those candidate names. And then we would actually, as staff, make sure that all of the proposals align with the policy, and then we would convene that review committee.
so the people don't, like the Concord property, we've been talking about the Concord property for a long time. I kind of just assumed that was the name of it. I didn't read, so it's a 30-day period when people are told, oh, we're gonna choose a name. And this is the time you have to give it.
Yeah, it's not going to be a really long process. So if this committee wants us to have a certain time frame for Concord projects, we could consider that, again, within the context of our construction schedule. So if your feedback is, hey, I think it would be great if we had 60 days for the Concord property, then we'll
Yeah.
consider that feedback.
And I guess so for me, my thinking is not so much it needs to be longer than 30 days. It's when the public is made aware, there's going to be a naming process sometime in the future. And I know that I'm not being clear. So, you know, like we've been sending out stuff about the Concord property. You know, is there, I mean, in the past, have they ever said, okay, a name will be chosen in
Yes.
the fall of 2024?
So we haven't specified the timing because we knew we needed to do this work first. But when we talk about the Concord property projects, you might note that we typically say something like the park, playground, and renovated community center at the Concord property. It's very similar to the park at the Jennings Lodge campus. And we always put a little blurb at the end that says that, you know, an official name will be selected
Okay,
before the site reopens.
okay, so the public is made aware in different ways that a name will be chosen
Yeah.
before that 30-day time period starts.
Well, we've been talking about it for a while, but it will be necessary for NCPRD to broadcast that we are soliciting applications to rename that site. So we will need to use social media. We'll lean on all of you to get the word out within your networks. We have a very large interested parties email distribution list. You know, we send out publications about our discovery guide and our, I always say this wrong, outside Outside, inside. Yeah, it's very clever. It's too clever for me. Thank you. So we have a lot of email distribution lists and ways to contact the community. We also expanded our interested parties list as part of the system plan project. So, we have some pretty good feelers in the community to get the word out, but, again, we'll look to all of you to help us get the word out. But I appreciate your point, which is we can't minimize that key step to basically notify the community that there's this opportunity.
Right.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And the point is really well taken, so thank you.
Anita?
The Portland, the Boardman Wetlands Nature Park got its name after it was completed, but do you wait until something's completed before you do this, or could you do it before it's completed?
Well, in the event of like the Concord property projects, we hope to actually have a name before that site reopens, so that again, we can fabricate all of those signs. That's really optimal.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. So you could start soon.
We would start very soon. That's why I'm here tonight.
Planning for it, right?
Exactly.
Also, I think, at least in some parks districts, don't they do extra outreach to the people that live immediately around something within a certain radius of an asset?
Well,
To
that-
give them a lot of sort of more notification maybe than the whole district, or.
Well, typically that's how like a land use application process works. We aren't really set up the same way.
Okay,
But I think you all could help us make sure that the community that is most impacted, that lives nearby, knows what's going on. We can also put some signage on site at Concord, for example,
right.
and help people understand that we've got this opportunity underway to rename the site. So that would be another way that we get the word out to immediate neighbors.
Yeah, I think immediate neighbors might have the most investment in what it is, and identify with it. And have a sort of loyalty to that particular amenity.
And historians, I've been
Yeah.
contacted by some community members that have deep roots in the community that are
Right.
very interested in seeing some of the history of the site come forward. So
Right.
that will also, I think, be an aspect that people will consider in the naming of Concord. That is.
Yeah, I think at one point they were talking about a history walk or something outside the main building. I don't know if that's still in plans.
Thank you.
Mayor Beatty?
Yeah, I had, I wanted, and this is just sort of lawyer in me, but, there's this park renaming guidelines, and it's kind of in the middle of the document, and it seems to me it breaks up the flow of the naming, and it would be better at the end. So that's just a sort of copy editing suggestion, but I also wondered when we talk about renaming, I guess I'm worried that, do we just get people wanting to rename everything? So-and-so's in a certain neighborhood and I don't like the name Altamira, I think we should name it for this or that. So I mean, should there be more of I get we need a renaming policy when we've got something that is a name that, we learn history about that we want to remove or something. But generally, should there be that kind of a determination first and not, are we opening the door too much to people to come in with renaming requests with this? And I guess, that's a policy decision for you guys to consider, but I kind of had that worry when I was reading this.
In my experience, I haven't seen that happen because it takes a tremendous amount of institutional effort and community effort to go through this process. So I haven't seen that happen frivolously, but in the event that we see that occurring, because we don't have the institutional capacity to rename sites just because. So if that becomes a problem, then certainly we could take a look at modifying the policy. I've yet to see a policy that prevents that because I don't think that happens very often. But but your point is well taken, that we should just be cautious.
Okay, and then my other, I appreciate the 1B clause 4 that facilities that NCPRD operates but does not own are not, this isn't applicable to them. In Milwaukee, we have had conversations about our own naming policy, and I think our equity steering committee is gonna sort of lead those conversations, but we're not as far along. I will definitely give them this document as something to look at. But I did feel like in the cover memo, all this says like park, open space owned or managed by NCPRD. I guess I feel like there's that owned or managed language that appears several times in the cover memo. Seems somewhat at odds with this. This acknowledgement that it doesn't apply to things you don't own.
So if the concern is specifically about the city of Milwaukee properties, then if you want to propose some language, that would be really helpful. I think that
Well, if you just struck or managed, and it just said open space owned by NCPRD, open space, yeah. With that, are there things that are not that NCPRD manages that doesn't own other than properties in Milwaukee, I guess it's.
we do manage some properties outside of the city of Milwaukee. I wouldn't see a reason for us to rename them at this point in time. Because typically we wouldn't have the authority. I think that Director Sadas, are you?
Yes, to respond to this, I mean, I'm just envisioning if we work with the school district or Oregon City School District on the Jenny's Lodge property, there might be an opportunity for a naming, right? We don't own it, we do manage it. And it would be applicable to this, to the language in the document. So there's an example of one. And I know that we do our best to try to use some of the school properties and maximize it. We're not gonna rename the school, but we can maybe name the park.
Right, exactly. So perhaps the language could be something like properties that we own, and for properties that we manage, we would do that renaming in collaboration with that entity, whether it's the city of Milwaukee, Oregon City School District. Maybe that's a way to handle it. It's just to be specific that we would collaborate to ensure that that other entity for which we are managing the property agrees with our approach and process. So if we inserted that kind of language for both the policy and the policy and procedures document, would that address your concern? Okay, yeah. And I think others might have that same concern, so I think that's a good change. Thank you.
Robert, please go.
Thank you. So I actually have bigger problems with this process for a couple of reasons. One, I know that the Committee for Community Involvement, which is working with PGA, as well as the Parks Advisory Board for the Clackamas County Parks, have been working on revising and have done tons of work from the beginning of this year till now, moving that forward. Are you familiar with that work?
I am.
Okay.
I am, and we're ahead of them in terms of their process. I coordinated with Tom Riggs, but one of the things that we need to just be aware of is that the NCPRD process is really tailored fit to NCPRD. And actually from a legal perspective, we need to have a separate policy and procedures so that when our board of directors convenes to go through this review process to consider what this review committee has proposed, they convene as the board of directors, not as the county commissioner. So we actually need to have a separate process as well that recognizes those differences too.
That raises a concern that I have from previous conversations that they want to, there is a push from the county or others to realign our bylaws to match other bylaws in the county. And yet you're now explaining that we are a separate entity, so we don't have that requirement to align. But that's not where I want to go with this, but that's a concern I have, that on the one hand, we're separate, but on the other hand, we should come into compliance with the other way that they do in other. But what I'm concerned about is we've spent a lot of work starting in this room, actually starting in Concord, to change how we do community outreach. And to include more community involvement, engagement, et cetera. The county has a document called the Clackamas County Community Engagement Framework, which we reviewed it in this meeting in September of 2022. There's a lot more of outreach that isn't being addressed in here, and it kind of follows what I heard Sheila talking about the fact that it's 30 days and run, and I want to use as an example. We did a lot of work went into doing outreach, and yet I repeatedly talked to people who have never heard that there is anything going on at Concord, or they never heard there's anything going on at Jennings Lodge, etc. So it isn't as widespread as one would like to think, because we do have 100 and some odd thousand people, and our ability to reach those people in a way that they can make a meaningful response is a big concern to me. And this is not a new conversation for me, but this doesn't, when we use language, the part that was most challenging for me is we use languages that talks about this being soliciting applications. Now, that is the most disjointed, that aren't we looking for input from the community as opposed to people who are advocating for a specific name or applying to cause this? And it is about input, and I'll use the naming of the Boardman wetlands as a perfect example. That process went through a second iteration, and in that second iteration, 130 people submitted names and whatnot, and there was discussion and so on and so forth. Which
Grover, is there a question that you were
no,
hoping to
I'll
ask the
make a
director?
motion to that we do not approve this at this time because it fails to meet the criteria that we have, which is to be focused on community outreach as opposed to coming up with a name. The
Okay.
name's an important thing, so I move that we do not approve this under its current condition.
Okay, so I hear a motion on the floor and you made a motivation for it. Is there a second?
And I've heard enough questions between everyone else, and I have my own questions. That yeah, I would like to second that motion.
Okay.
And just.
So now we have-
Are we ready to vote?
No, we're
Or
ready
we-
to have discussion.
Discussion?
Thank you.
We're behind on schedule. What time would you like to have for discussion? How much time will you need?
Well, the idea that it even addresses the 30-day minimum when we look at any other process, and particularly when you say that the committee that's going to evaluate has 2 months, but the broad public to get the word out and get information in is only minimum of 30 days. Yes, it could be a lot more, but to even have it be considered being a minimum of 30 days, I think sidesteps our primary responsibility, which is to engage the community.
To clarify, how much time do we need for discussion?
I'm not a time setter.
For the motion on the floor,
Yes,
is there a sense of how much time that will need?
I'm still saying a few things and I haven't heard from anybody else yet, so I couldn't tell you.
Okay, I think, Director Selly.
So what would be really helpful is, my intent is to receive your feedback and see if we can accommodate that feedback in this final policy and keep the process moving. Because I think that we're all have the same interest in making sure that we have a thoughtful process that engages the community, but gets our assets named in a timely fashion. So I think from talking to many of you, I think we share that goal. So it would be really helpful to receive specific feedback. So for example, if the public notification process is concerning and you all would like 45 days, 90 days, please provide that specific feedback, but general comments about the engagement process doesn't coincide with the community engagement framework from Clackamas County. It's hard for me to understand where to start. So again, be specific. I would also say too that I want to call your attention, Grover, to the step 4 on page 3 of the document. You'll see that there's a very specific committee listed for the committee review. And it's pertains to NCPRD. Again, we talk a lot about local conversations. And so we try to make that as local to NCPRD as we could. So that's why this review committee is different than county parks. We are different than county parks. So we again have made a tailor-made process for NCPRD.
Colleen, Mark?
Question is, if we are making a recommendation to the board, we are not approving this policy. Right?
That's correct. So the DAC makes recommendations to the board of directors, correct? And it's our job as staff to take your feedback and compile it in such a way that we think that the board will move towards approval.
Grover?
Yes, okay, so I just want to clarify what you said moments ago, and it sort of fits with answer to Mark's question. You're suggesting that you want more input, and so it isn't that we're going to recommend it as is. That's what I heard you say moments ago, but now what Mark said in your response is that we are actually, you want us to recommend it, and there may be some more stuff added. That's piece 1. But there's simple little things like here on below item 4, it says the naming committee will convene within 2 months, which again, 2 months versus 30 days following an application, but it says it doesn't include that it ever comes back through the DAC. And if we're gonna have all this work being done, that's piece 1. The second part is many of the community planning organizations don't meet on a monthly basis. So it would be a matter of how would you get input from having a person from a CPO is one thing, but to actually have input from that body of interested people, it's hard to do on that kind of timeline. And lastly, I do know that when I looked at what they did put into the documents and the planning for the Parks Advisory Board, they're still parks, there's still people, it's the same taxpayers, just different area. They specifically put a lot of work into how the outreach is going to be done. And the criteria that goes into it and how it can produce a result, as opposed to just a time period. Because when it says public notification and promote the naming opportunity, back to Sheila's question from before, how do you do that and know that you've reached a significant number of people?
So.
Colleen, oh, sorry, the direct response.
So
Thank
just
you.
so there are many questions there. I think I'm going to try to remember all of them. So my first response is tonight I'm here to receive your feedback. For example, Mayor Beatty had some great edits. We're going to take those edits and integrate those edits into the draft that goes before the board. The next step is to actually go to a policy session with the board of directors. It's not actually go to an issues meeting and then to a business meeting. So we still actually have a step before the official review and approval. But to be clear, I'm here to take your feedback tonight. So, so I'm open to feedback. And so Sheila, if you feel more comfortable with 45 days, I would love to hear 45 days. In the public notification step 1, you see that we have noted several of the entities that we'll be communicating with. But if there are others, please let us know. I would also add that in step 4, we have a district advisory committee representative on the review committee. So we're trying really hard to make sure that we're not actually coming to you after we've had a conversation. We actually want a DAC representative to be in that discussion as part of the review committee. So the idea there, again, would not be that the DAC is on the outside of the process receiving a report later. The DAC is embedded in the process. So those are some of my responses to your questions. I hope I've addressed them.
Mr. Reed?
I know this is not really related, but maybe Grover, this is kind of going meta to we're a powerless board effectively, right? Maybe we should be pushing more for local control. To say it again, our finances are broken and local control would be a benefit. Issues like that might help push us in the direction of getting the feeling that this is actually run by those who live here, not a subset of one who maybe lives here and the rest external. Maybe shifting our focus to the higher goal might be a benefit here. Just throwing that out there, getting back on focus of what might actually push the ball, not just throw pebbles at the ball.
Thank you for the comment. I'm going to focus us back to the question at hand in a parliamentary way. Is the motion on the floor of whether or not we should recommend this policy. So I'll call on Sheila.
So I guess what I would like to say, I would like to see if the public notification and the soliciting are happening simultaneously. I would like to see the 30 change to 45, and my thinking on that is to allow the people and the CPOs and all those organizations a little bit of extra time to call another meeting of their group. At least, so that's my suggestion.
Mayor Beatty.
Yeah, I'm not generally supportive of, I mean, I would like to see us pass it tonight, so I'm not generally supportive of the motion, but I would like to hear Daniel's questions that led him to second the motion, so that those are out here.
Thank you. Daniel?
I guess more just, kind of agreeing with Sheila, when you said 1,500, I thought I've wasted 2 weeks before, you know, I don't know how much that'll add, and when, I guess I'd like to know a little more because right now, if it's just maybe the lead time on producing some signage, you know, for like in this instance, like a part of the fall of 2025 and it's mid-fall 2024, that doesn't seem like a huge task to me. And part of my job is getting a lot of things printed and distributed, and proofreading, and a lot of, you know, I don't do huge signs that are permanent, but a lot of huge signs that are temporary. So I guess I'm just kind of struggling to understand the urgency of like 30 days or even 45 for public comment, you know, and just trying to learn more about how our community engagement actually hits the community, you know, and seeing the numbers of email, you know, clicks, and I don't know how coherent that is, but just a lot of questions in my head
Do you
about
have
that time period.
response or?
I have more questions that we never.
I was
addressed.
looking at Director Selling.
Oh, well, how did I know?
I clarified.
So, so Daniel, I'm not clear if, I didn't hear a number from you. I heard you kind of ask me the
sure.
question. You
Yeah.
were, so it sounds like, you were just putting it out there that, at least what I thought I heard you say is that, you're not sure of the right time frame, but you're trying to figure out what kind of time frame do we need to make sure we've done sufficient public engagement.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there is a magic number, but I think you all here around the table are part of many different groups. And so if 45 days seems right to you, we'll build in 45 days to make sure that everybody knows what we're doing. It's actually beneficial to NCPRD to make sure that everybody does know what we're doing, does participate, so that we have the most buy-in and ownership of the final name. So I want to reassure you that I want to make sure that we don't get to the end of the process where the board of directors is considering a proposal and there's a lot of community pushback on that idea. I don't think the board wants that to happen either. So if it's even more than 45 days, please tell me. But being specific would be very helpful. Like this.
Joel?
Well, I'm not trying to belabor this too much, but if we're dissecting language, I think what actually I took comfort in was not the 30 days, but it was a minimum of 30 days. A minimum of 45 days. It would be an interpretation to the feedback you get, having gone through a renaming endeavor with the Milwaukee Community Center that lasted 18 months. We would have loved a 30-day turnaround, but we still have people calling it the senior center too. So regardless of all of our good intentions, people are going to call this stuff what they want to call it. But I think even as it's written, a minimum of 30 days covers in perpetuity, as far as I'm concerned. It's a policy, so it's not designed just for the Concord project. It's designed for anything. Renaming, fresh names, anything like that. So I'm comfortable with the language as it is, but I guess if we need to put a 45 instead of a 30 or a 60 instead of a 30, as long as it's preceded by a minimum, it's gold.
Joel? Grover?
Right, we didn't address, and I appreciate Sheila's comment about letting CPOs don't call extra meetings, generally. They have set meetings and they could if there's an emergency, but to motivate them to do that would not necessarily be it. And CPOs are a listed body here. In addition to that, they still have difficulty calling it an application as opposed to submissions or suggestions, because this is like someone's applying for or wants a license or something. And I don't know where that word comes from. And then you have it down here and you call it tactics as opposed to at the end of paragraph 2. That you call tactics as opposed to options or whatever. I think it feels like this was brought from something else and pushed in here. Lastly, there is no inclusion in the DAC to make a recommendation here. So we talked about giving you suggestions for a policy, but there is no suggestion that after the naming, the DAC doesn't come back to it. Having a person from the DAC represented is one thing, but that's not the DAC. And the whole reason we are designed the way we are is each one of us is from a sub area and we have a relationship with that sub area as just opposed to having our own opinions. So I am concerned that we are not broadening the reach, we are narrowing the reach. Having a person be on that board or on that committee is one thing, but it doesn't get additional community input, which is my primary reason for being.
So I heard 2 suggestions. One is to change the word application to submittal or something like that. As long as that doesn't trigger a problem for our legal staff. I don't know if the word application has a certain quality legally as opposed to submittal. But if it doesn't, then I'm happy to change that. And then the second suggestion I heard was to insert a step between step 4 and step 5. I'm going to call it 4.5. And that would be to return to the DAC for review and discussion. And that's what we typically do with most of our business items here. If you don't see one of us here at the dais, then it's integrated with the director's report. So I don't see that as problematic either. And I can circle back with all of you if for some reason that is a problem. So I'm making that modification on the fly right here.
Ananta, is it brief?
Yes,
Okay.
it's really tiny, but I just wish libraries were also in step 1.
Libraries.
They don't belong to NCPRD.
As a place where you can do outreach,
Oh,
where you can put posters, or where you can put flyers, or where you can let the public know.
Including but not limited to.
Yeah, we can do it anywhere. Put it on your door.
Yeah, no, I understand, but that you could do more than are listed in here, but just very fond of NCPRD coordinating with the library.
Yeah, okay.
I do see your flag, Director Savas, and then also, we had a really robust discussion. We've gone over time, or should we hear from you and then ask if we're ready for a vote?
Well, I just want to just help you all along and with suggestion. I mean, ideally, instead of just saying we don't approve it, it'd be nice to have guidance of what changes we would want, right? So, I heard some, but we could probably spend 2 or 3 more meetings going over the naming policy, or we could try and make some traction and get it done, so we can actually talk about more serious things that we have to attend to. So I would like to see just suggestions, ideally, edits, bring them forward and vote on those edits, as opposed to just saying wholesalely, we're not gonna approve it. And that's what's on the table right now for a motion. So I just want to make that distinction. That there's something constructive on the table, not something that essentially has no end, there's no end to that, right? There's not a there.
Right, I'd like to respond to that specifically. This was not listed as, this is support of naming policy is what it says on the agenda, the piece 1. Piece 2, there is either approving or not approving. This was not designed, and there's not time built into this to be a place where we actually do editing or making suggestions. This whole process was supposed to take 15 minutes. And so it really wasn't meant to, well, then we could change this and change that. That's what I did appreciate, looking at what the parks and the committee for community input, they have been working on it over months, and each time more things are considered and voted on, and another item is voted on and voted on and voted on, as opposed to in a few minutes, we just off the cuff make some suggestions and make some changes. So that is why I didn't know this was going to be an editing session. So that's why I suggested that we don't approve it at this time.
Direct response, we've had the opportunity as an advisory committee to review this for a month, to formulate questions and bring up concerns. If you're like me and you finally finished reading the packet tonight, I get it. But I really don't want to have perfect be the enemy of completed in this case. Right now, considering Director Savas's recommendation, it could be that the motion on the floor is amended. It could be that someone calls the question and we go to a vote. Or a third thing, if you can think of it, Grover, that we can keep moving forward with.
By when would you need the recommendations that you need?
Tonight is preferable.
Which
We would
was-
like to-
Which was announced last month.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was in our packet, the policy wasn't, which is why we delayed it,
Yeah.
but.
and we
did get
didn't
a
intend to do it, yeah.
When did the policy actually get distributed to us?
Here's an email, I think, a few weeks ago.
I think it was right after the last
Yeah.
meeting.
In the DAC packet.
It's part of the package.
Yes.
I received it, I wasn't here.
So there was a full presentation at the last DAC meeting.
There was,
And what you did receive at the last DAC meeting were these 2 documents, the policy document and the procedures document, and that was an error on NCPRD staff. So that's why we brought it back, because we wanted to make sure that you all had ample time to review this and then an opportunity to discuss it. So I've heard some edits tonight. If someone wants to summarize those, or I'm happy to summarize those, and you all could consider a motion, I'm happy to do whatever you need to facilitate that work.
So before she would do that, we need to call the question on the motion on the floor, correct? So I will
Yes.
call the question.
Okay, then we go to a vote.
I actually would withdraw the motion and let you do whatever else you want.
Okay, the motion on the floor has been withdrawn. And we are still in the action item portion of our agenda, support of the naming policy. I'd like to call on Mark, if I may. Sorry, Mark. It's, oh. You know, it's my understanding that as an advisory committee, part of our job is to advise, and we were wanting to advise that, yes, we need a naming policy so that the amenities at the Concord School can keep trucking along. I'll finish there. Is there any additional items on this agenda? Any different additional words are hard. Any additional things we need to talk about right now then?
in order to move forward, do we need a motion saying that we're
I
supporting
mean-
this, or what do you need from us at this point? We've given you feedback.
Well, I think if I can speak, we either need a motion to accept as is, or a motion that amends it and accepts it that with a recommendation to the board. Or to the directors, right? So that's my understanding, one or the other. Clean bill or fixed bill. Got it? You either approve it the way it is, or you make a motion to amend it. With the intention of approving it for recommendation to the board of directors. That makes sense.
Well, I guess what I would like to do is make a motion to approve it with the edits.
That's right.
That you're going to do, reflecting our discussion that we've had this evening.
That would mean that we would
Second.
wait another time. And I don't think we wanna, I think that the thought is let's not wait for it.
Okay, so,
We wanna do that right now.
so I'm erasing that. So do I move we approve it with the edits?
And you need to suggest what those edits are.
Oh, the edits of the language changes that, do I have to be specific
You
about
do.
that? Okay, the language changes involved the city of Milwaukee, the language clarifying the city of Milwaukee as an exception in a certain
Owned.
spot, okay? And, putting libraries into the step one. Looking at the word application to see if submission or some other language is appropriate. Changing to a minimum of 45 days. And I believe that's it.
The DAC review step.
Oh,
and 4.5.
step 4.5, where it comes back to the DAC for review.
Second.
Motion on the floor, seconded by Joel. Any discussion? Sounds like a no, we'll go to a vote.
Is the motion to amend this and also recommend this amended document to the board of directors?
Thank you, Mark.
Is that correct?
So point of information, he's asking, are we voting to accept it with the edits listed and recommend it to the board of directors? Or is it to accept it with the edits?
And recommend it to the board of directors.
Okay,
Second.
amended, seconded. Shall we vote? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, any opposed? One opposed, any abstain? That's 0. Okay, motion passes. Thank you
We
for
don't
the
have anybody online.
feedback. Okay, that takes us to item 3, which is our discussion agenda. For fiscal year 25-26 budget kickoff. And the bullet point of the DAC liaison to the budget committee. So I will invite Director Selly to continue. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. We're gonna change gears here. You all know who I am. I'm presenting to you this evening in place of Kelly Gudner. She is out sick today. So this evening is the kickoff of NCPRD's budget preparation process for fiscal year 2025-26, which begins July 1st of next year. My presentation tonight includes 2 parts. Part 1 is educational and will include an overview of NCPRD's budget structure. And part 2 is an exercise to receive feedback on your priorities for planning and development, projects and programs and services. So part 2 of this evening is at the DAC's request and is intended to increase DAC participation in our budget preparation process. So please consider part 2 to be a pilot effort that we will improve with your partnership over time. And in the interest of time, I request that you hold your questions on part one until the end of part one, so there is sufficient time remaining for the part two exercise. So let's begin. Next slide, please. The NCPRD budget includes 5 funds. The NCPRD General Fund has the most flexible funds, and it's where we collect revenue like property taxes and where you'll see our operating expenses. We have 3 system development charged funds, and this is where we collect SDC permit fees from new development, such as a new apartment building or a major redevelopment. And these funds can be used to build new parks and facilities. The last fund is our capital projects fund, where we hold funds for our capital projects, such as the new park at the Concord property, yet unnamed, and large repairs and replacements of district assets, such as a replacement of a pump here at the aquatic park. Provided here are some terms you're going to see throughout our whole budget preparation process and in the budget document, and you really should understand these. I'm not going to go through every one of them, but I'm going to clarify just a few key terms. So reserves are funds set aside or reserved for future spending. We don't use these funds typically, it's our savings account. Capital outlay is the budget category for funding assets with a value of $10,000 or more and a useful life of more than 1 year. So we're not talking here about budgeting for grass seed. We're talking here about, again, that aquatic park pump. Expenditure, fiscal years I mentioned earlier, but this is really important because it's odd for some of you that are new to government. It's a 12-month period that starts July 1 and goes until June 30. So we're talking about budget prep for the period starting July 1, 2025. Revenue is income received to support programs provided to the community, and there's a whole range of revenue that we bring in. Grants, donations, taxes, fees. So many different colors of money some of us will refer to. Next slide. Here's the current fiscal year budget totaling $61.5 million, including the changes that we received approval for in September as part of our supplemental budget. We can request board approval for changes to our current fiscal year budget by proposing a supplemental budget. And we do that typically once a year. We have the budget broken down here in 2 buckets, operating and non-operating. Operating expenses are directly related to our programs and daily operations and provide funding to what we refer to as our 5 lines of business: administration, programs and community centers, older adult services, parks, trails, and natural areas, and planning and development. Operating expenses include personnel costs and materials and services associated with these 5 lines of business. Non-operating totals $49.8 million, and that includes capital improvement projects, again, such as that new park at the Concord property, capital repair and replacement projects. That's different than a capital improvement project, and that basically is to replace something like that aquatic park pump. Interfund transfers, which we talk a lot about because we're moving money from one fund to another, so you're going to hear us talking about transfers. Contingency and reserves. And so because of some of these bigger pots of money, which you can see there on the right in the non-operating budget, that operating budget becomes quite large. We'll go into more detail on these items in the next few slides. Next slide. The general fund houses NCPRD's 5 lines of business, as I mentioned earlier, and here we list the various revenue streams that align to each line of business. And I think this slide is a little confusing and it looks microscopic from where I'm sitting. If we could make that presentation bigger, let's try. We can zoom in a little bit. Thank you. Please note that the NCPRD does not receive any county general fund. Thank you, Jessica. But instead is primarily funded with taxes collected from district residents, which was set at 54 cents per 1,000 of assessed value over 30 years ago. So it's a permanent tax rate. Again, no county general fund is allocated to NCPRD. The administration line of business includes the director, deputy director, executive support, and finance and marketing. We receive in that bucket property taxes from district residents, which you'll see there is 30% of the general fund resources and a very small amount of revenue from special use permits. The programs and community center line of business is comprised of recreation, such as adult art classes, kids summer camps, and summer concerts and movies. Aquatics, all of the programs here at the aquatic park, and sports. Think Hoover's basketball for kids, adult softball, and adaptive and inclusive sports programs. Revenue received here is from program registrations, facility rentals, special events, contributions, and donations, which is about 10% of the general fund, not including a very small amount for contributions and donations. The older adult services line of business includes older adult transportation, such as driving older adults to and from the Milwaukee Community Center and a trip to the grocery store. Older adult social services, such as in-home visits, and older adult nutrition, including Meals on Wheels and meals 5 days each week at the Milwaukee Community Center. This line of business receives some contributions and donations, including those from the Milwaukee Community Center Foundation. Thank you, Foundation. Some travel program revenue, special event revenue, and grant funding from Clackamas County Social Services. So they typically, the Social Services Department typically gets those from the federal government or state. So they're run through social services. Again, no county general fund. The Parks, Trails, and Natural Areas line of business is comprised of parks, natural areas, and facility maintenance. Revenue receives is typically, again, you're going to hear some things here, facility rentals, grants, and maintenance contracts with other entities. For example, we have a maintenance contract next door with Wes to help maintain that natural area. The planning and development line of business houses our planning program and currently receives grant revenue for projects. All other revenue line item is interest revenue. Next slide, please. General fund expenditures include the 6 uses shown here. And I want to note that NCPRD personnel costs are included in the materials and services bucket because NCPRD employees are contracted employees from Clackamas County, since NCPRD is a service district. So you'll see that as throughout the budget document, and it can be sometimes confusing. Transfers are the movement of funds between funds, such as between the general fund and the capital projects fund for a project like the park and the Concord property. And allocated costs or fees the district pays to the county for support services like human resources, legal, technology services. Contingency is money set aside in the current budget that we can utilize if an unanticipated need arises. And reserves are money set aside for future use, again, like a savings account. Next slide, please. System development charges, or commonly called SDCs, are one-time fees collected from new development or significant redevelopments. And this is a really limited source of funding. Limited, I mean limited in terms of its use, not in terms of its generation. These funds can only be used to fund projects that increase the capacity of the district to serve growth. So think new capital projects or major enhancements like a pickleball court at an existing park. So we can't renovate an existing park and just do like a turf renovation in the same sort of dimension. We actually have to increase the capacity of that park to serve new growth. SDCs also cannot be used for operations or maintenance, and they also can't be used for repair or replacements. Again, that new aquatic park pump cannot be funded with SDCs. We have 3 SDC zones. Zone 1 includes City of Milwaukee and the urban growth management area that's just to the east of City of Milwaukee. Those are 2 separate accounts, so we keep those funds separate. And a process improvement for the budget document next year is that we're actually going to have a table that breaks out the City of Milwaukee SDC funds from the urban growth management area funds. And I think that's a good improvement. So thank you to City of Milwaukee staff for suggesting that. Zone 2 is shown in pink and includes the Concord property where we're currently constructing that new park, playground, and renovated community center. And Zone 3 is shown in blue, located east of I-205. The beginning fund balance for all zones this fiscal year was 13.5 million. So keep in mind that some of these resources are allocated to current capital projects. But I just call out that number because it's a pretty generous fund for us to use for capital improvements. Next slide, please. The Capital Projects Fund includes the capital improvement project and capital repair and replacement programs. The list of prioritized capital improvement projects will be identified in the system plan, as we've talked about, and are eligible for SDC funds since they increase the district's capacities to serve growth. We can't fund an entire project typically, but typically a good portion of that project. Capital repairs and replacements are major repairs and replacement of district assets. I'm going to go back to that aquatic park pump. And please note that interfund transfers again include revenue transfers from like the general fund and SDC funds to this fund. Next slide, please. This slide just shows for context what we accomplished last fiscal year with NCPRD resources. We expect to build upon many of these numbers as we continue to return to normalcy and return to that pre-pandemic business environment. The system plan project and the construction of the Concord property will be substantially completed in the current fiscal year. You all know that we're opening the Concord property projects in the fall of 2025, but close enough. Next slide, please. NCPRD provides an online opportunity for the community to submit proposals that require budget through the budget proposal form. Again, this is on our website. The form's always available on our website throughout the year. Any form received prior to December 15th of the upcoming fiscal year is analyzed during budget development now for financial feasibility, equity, alignment with the emerging system plan priorities, and staff capacity. And what I mean by that is staff capacity to design, develop the project, operate it, maintain it. For the upcoming budget cycle, we've received submissions for additional parking at Pfeiffer Park and enhancements to the North Clackamas Park Playground and Dog Park. Next slide, please. Here's a high-level overview of the annual budget preparation process for the district. We use this slide a lot, so I included it tonight. What's not shown is the work that we're doing right now to receive your feedback on district priorities and the work that staff will do to prepare a requested budget. So again, what we're doing tonight is a pilot. It's not part of the official process. But these are the major steps that we've done every year for quite some time. County Finance will review the requested budget that we submit in early February. They will ensure that it's balanced in accordance with Oregon budget law. Then the requested budget is presented to the county administrator, Gary Schmidt, for approval. Then the proposed budget is then presented to the budget committee, which is comprised of 5 district residents. Grover is now a budget committee member, and the 5 NCPRD directors, which are also Clackamas County commissioners. At the budget committee meeting, they will approve the budget. Once the budget's approved, it's then adopted by the board in June, and an adopted budget is published. Changes after adoption, as I mentioned earlier, are completed through a supplemental budget process, and typically those are available for us to do on a quarterly basis throughout the fiscal year. Next slide, please. These are upcoming meetings that are planned to improve communication, involvement, and transparency in the budget process. Specific dates will be forthcoming. I will say that next Thursday is the first budget committee meeting. So today, this is our budget 101 overview with the DAC, which is noted there in the slide. And we're going to, in part 2, be talking about DAC priorities. We meet next, as I mentioned, with the budget committee. And at the budget committee meeting, we will educate the newly appointed members and have that DAC liaison. And we can talk more about that in a minute. Present input from the discussion that we'll cover in part 2 of this evening. So again, we're trying to get the DAC to have a conversation with the budget committee, as well as have the budget committee meet far earlier in the process, so they really do know our budget. In February, we will be back to both groups to give a high-level proposed budget preview. We do have some limitations because of budget law. This will be another opportunity for the DAC liaison to confirm priorities with the budget committee. And then in May, after the proposed budget's ready, we'll have a joint meeting where we'll give a high-level overview of the information we plan to bring forward in the annual budget committee meeting to both the DAC and the budget committee. In late May, as per usual, the annual budget committee will meet those 5 district residents and those 5 directors. And then the expectation is that they approve the budget, and then in June, again, the board of directors will adopt the budget. Next slide, please. We've covered this somewhat already, but I just want to reiterate that the DAC's role in the budget process is to provide input to staff on these items, stay at a relatively high level, and provide information and support to the budget committee. So, and we hope that DAC members will encourage community members to also submit their budget requests online. So you all are a connection to the community, so please continue to have those conversations. Next slide. In an effort to, again, improve communication and engagement between the DAC and the budget committee, this is my official request this evening to request that the DAC appoint a liaison to the budget committee after part 2 of this presentation. The DAC liaison will again communicate DAC values and priorities, be a resource for the budget committee, and share any comments or concerns that they're hearing from the DAC throughout the process, as I noted before. Next slide. So this concludes part 1 of my presentation. And before I begin part 2, are there any questions?
Your video.
Well, first off, DA, if Grover's on the budget committee, you still want a liaison
Yes.
on top of that?
Yes.
Okay, okay. And, second, the word transfers, it's something we deal with in the Milwaukee budget too, but, it seems to me those slides show a couple of different kinds of transfers, and I know that there's one thing that's transfers from like SDC funds to the capital fund. But there's also the transfers you have to make to the NCPRD makes to the county for services that you get from the county. And I guess I'd like to know what that percentage and what that number.
Oh, okay. I don't have that tonight, so we'll note that question and I'll get back to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if it was Anita or Mark, but I'll call on Anita.
Just in terms of the budget proposal that's in the financial section, I think it's pretty invisible to the public. And not easy to find and not really obvious, and I just wonder, I don't have a picture in my mind, but I wonder if there's a way to make it more visible to other people.
So that's a great suggestion for marketing and communications, and I suspect that that will be accommodated in our new website, which will be launched in January, which is after we've started our budget process. So I will work with marketing and communications to see if we can make it more prominent, especially since it's budget season. Thank you for your comment.
Mark?
Yeah, question is, if the DAC representative, are they a voting member of the budget committee?
No.
Or just a liaison?
Yes.
Mr.
Can SDCs be used for park acquisition?
Yes. For property acquisition.
Yes, sorry, for to acquire property.
Yes.
Great. Sheila?
Okay, so on the general fund expenditures page, you talked about that personnel is under the materials and services part. The allocated costs, is that part of contingency?
No, no. So, I think you are asking a similar question to the question that Mayor Beatty posed. And I'll need to provide, if you're interested in the amount or the percentage of our budget that funds allocated services, I'll need to get back to you on that.
I was just trying to make sense, because I know sometimes the graphs don't correspond with the language, so on some of the pages you have things listed and it's not, but this one seemed to be a pretty direct. You have materials and services are listed and that's there in the list. Transfers is listed and that's there. Contingency is listed. Reserves is listed. And you mentioned that, personnel is under materials and services. So are you saying allocated costs is maybe under more than one of those pie pieces?
It would be under one of those, and I'll need to confirm which one.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
and that's fine. And when does the budget committee meet?
The first meeting of the budget committee is next Thursday. And that's really an educational meeting similar to the meeting here today.
And does it always meet on Thursdays?
No, this is entirely new. And they're not going to meet on a highly regular basis. Their first meeting's next Thursday, and then we meet again with them in February.
Thank you.
Grover? Thank you.
First of all, thank you for doing this. I so much appreciate the additions to the extra meetings and so forth. Similar to the question I got asked before, it always bothers me, the transfers. Why can't it be identified? These were transferred from SDCs and these were transferred from general fund, so that there is a tracing of where the money came from. Because transfers, we lose that, and it's struggling with that for years. So similar to knowing what the allocated costs are and I forget what the other question was, but to know, to spell out.
I'll see what we can do.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how that can be tracked. Mayor Beatty's question about allocated charges is more specific, but I'll look into how we might be able to provide more transparency about actual transfers.
Right, because it still had a source. It was either SDCs or it was general fund and general fund is where all the tax dollars go.
Correct.
Thank you. Part two.
Okay. All right, so as promised, part two of this presentation is at the DAC's request. And again, this is the first time that we've engaged the DAC in this type of budget discussion. So please consider this a pilot effort and we will improve this with your partnership over time. So I'm open to your feedback. The purpose of this discussion is for the DAC to provide input to staff on priorities. So we're going to say really high level. So if staff have to make choices about funding different parts of our services and programs and projects, we need to understand your priorities. Thank you, Jessica. Before I begin I ask that each of you participate. So if you don't speak up, I'm going to actually reach out and call on you. You can give me a thumbs up or thumbs down, but I want everybody to weigh in. And then please also allow time for your colleagues to provide input, again, because I want everybody to weigh in. So for the fiscal year 25-26 planning and development budget, we are taking a close look at a list of our projects and applying a realistic lens given existing NCPRD staff capacity. You might remember in May, I said the very same thing to the budget committee that was convened to review our budget. And I said, I'm not going to just give you a list of projects and allocate resources. These are things that we actually will work on this fiscal year. So that's what we show here. And so identify here the projects that the planning and development team has capacity to accomplish in fiscal year 25-26. You'll notice that this list is shorter than the list included in the division report in the DAC packet, because each of these projects, if they make it into the requested budget, will have funding allocated. You'll also note that the big asterisk on this slide that the system plan will identify the final and a more robust list of projects to be completed over multiple fiscal years. And we hope to have that accomplished before next summer. For future budgeting cycles, that prioritized capital improvement project list from the system plan will directly inform the projects we will be undertaking. So we're in a little bit of an in-between period, but we do have some things to finish. So that's largely what you see here. So I'm going to pause here and invite each of you to provide feedback.
Not a feedback so much as a question. System plan adoption wrap up reads like it's done because we're past the first quarter of fiscal year 25. I assume that really is blue boxes through, because we haven't had the phase 3 and 4.
Oh, Mayor Beatty, I think that it's probably because it's so small up there, but that's fiscal year 25-26, so beginning in July. So the first quarter of, so basically the first quarter of fiscal year 2025-26, we will complete the system plan.
So are we in 25-26 now?
No.
This is a fiscal year.
This is 2024-25.
So that first box is,
Okay.
July,
Yeah.
August, September, yeah.
Basically next
year.
next
Next
July.
year.
Next-
Yes.
Ah, okay.
It's a mind bender.
We call this, in Milwaukee, this is fiscal year 25,
Okay.
where we started that in July, so that's,
Okay.
okay, that's my confusion, okay.
I had a question about the system methodology update. I keep remembering we are stalled out on that and not moving forward on it, and we expect to not be stalled out on it by this time next year.
We expect to begin that work after the system plan is completed.
Can you clarify what that means, the methodology update? Can you clarify?
You might remember a couple of years ago, there was work to determine how best to collect SDC resources. I wasn't here then, so I watched the video and it was 3 zones versus 1 zone. There was also some work to update the SDC rate. And there was also some work, I think, on some of the zone language, but we never finished that work. So we have an outdated rate, and also typically the recommendation is to have 1 zone, not to have 3 zones, because it becomes more complicated in terms of accounting. So we will kind of pick that project back up where we left off a couple of years ago.
So the intent of this might be to massage the methodology, but not particularly it may include a recommendation on changing the SDC rate, right?
That's, I think, where the focus will be, correct, but I don't want to presuppose where we might want to take that.
And that the purpose of phase 3 and 4 is to make recommendations from the consultants to us on proposed amendments to the methodology. Is that right?
Well, it wasn't part of the project, so I need to stay pretty high level. I don't know if it was phases 3 and 4. But the idea is that we pick up where we left off.
I thought that there was an intent that they would give us some ideas on how we might improve our revenue. And that SDCs would be one of them, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought perhaps they were going to say, hey, I'm not gonna make it up, but that they would have some input, or that they would give to us as a recommendation as a consultant on how we might amend our SDC rates.
Oh. Excuse me, Mark, I'm confused. You're talking about system plan phases 3 and 4.
Yes,
I apologize. I misunderstood. I thought you were talking about the SDC methodology, and that's why I wasn't part of that project. So the design workshop will be they will not be providing us with an updated methodology or with updated rates for the SDCs.
they will not.
They will not.
So their intent is not to say, if you raise the SDCs to this is what your outcome will be. No,
So they're gonna be a little bit higher level and looking at multiple different funding opportunities to increase overall funding for the district. And various avenues that we might look at, and one of those might be a recommendation to do something like an SDC methodology update, which we already kind of know what we need to do. Alongside a number of other different recommendations, but what this SDC methodology update does is it goes through and takes a look at SDC rates for all of the parks districts in the state and how we grade against those. It takes a look at our list of projected projects and what the anticipated SDC rate would be in order to complete those projects. So it's a much more detailed analysis. Does that help?
Somewhat, this is off topic, so I'll stay.
We're happy to talk with you offline more about that.
And I just have a follow-up question, the part about the SCC methodology update and the comment about the recommendation is one zone and then what is stopping us from going from 3 zones to 1 zone? Is that?
I don't have those answers tonight. I'd like to talk about that when we get to, that project.
Okay.
So you all have asked some great questions, but haven't heard your input per se.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. So are you asking us to rate these and,
This is our draft project list. And so if you, for example, if you say, what is this Trails Network plan? I don't think that's a priority at all. And I'm concerned that we're spending time on it. That would be a consideration. If we need
Okay.
to move something off of our list to make space for something else that pops up that we didn't anticipate, then that would be helpful input. If you say this looks great and if nothing else changes, I think this is a good plan, that would be fine too.
okay. So yeah, system plan is number 1 for me and I'm happy with the rest. I think Mayor Beatty?
So just for the record, I would like to see Milwaukee Bay Park be not on hold, but I realize that's not our decision to make here at this table. I would just also question, can we not get justice property concept planning happening sooner than
Sure.
4th quarter?
Good input, thank you.
Anita?
Yeah, I would also like the justice property to be moved up if possible and for something to possibly happen in sub area 4, which hasn't been on the capital projects list. With all the other ones.
I think, was it Sheila next?
I don't.
We'll call Sheila next. Thank you.
I guess my input would be that if something needed to be, if there wasn't funding, if something needed to be, reduced, I would say trails, and I'm saying that only because that hasn't started yet. So that would be something to postpone.
Sorry?
Whatever we can do, if funding allows, to convince the people in the areas that have fewer parks that NCPRD actually cares is doing things, would be great, because then it might make it easier for us to go and ask them to change the body of governance, more money. Show the people we're doing something, instead of just talking. I know that was not meant to say we're just sitting and talking, but I think people want parks, like the justice property, et cetera, what Anna is saying. People want to see things.
So of this list, what are your priorities, Mr. Reed?
I personally would like to add, but I know the finances are not there. But then with SDCs potentially being able to be used, that might be an option to show people that things are being done by fixing parks that are there, or acquiring additional property before it gets purchased by a developer for something that the community may not want. It's more of a, I can send you an email later, it's more of just a high level comment, kind of piggybacking up on his email, or to what I was talking about earlier, how can we move to what I hope was the conversation a few months ago of moving towards governance, fixing our financial problems, so we can be a successful district. Otherwise, I think it's projected we're running out of money. And I just don't see how it can go if we don't have any money.
Calling on Mark.
Let's see. So I am hopeful that our systems development plan will result in a priority list of projects we feel are important to pursue. So I'm hopeful that is going to be all inclusive and include, properties and, development of properties in underserved areas. So that's my hope. And I hope we'll all do a really good job of making that really clear. And communicating that to the community. So my feeling is the methodology update may be too soon. That perhaps we won't have enough information in order to start that discussion. That there may be other steps necessary once we finish the systems plan to understand what we're dealing with. And how to develop a plan based on real money, not imagined.
I think we'll invite Daniel to share.
You can do this.
Yeah, everything else on the list outside of the system plans, kind of just abstract to me, I don't know. I don't have a plan, so I like seeing that, Q1. Yeah.
Well, actually, I think it's really encouraging to hear all of the faith and the support for the system plan. So that is very encouraging to me as a staff person that we're on the right course. And I would agree that it will inform our future priorities. So this is very helpful. All right, let's move to the next slide because I know we have other things to accomplish tonight. Thank you for your feedback on that. So this slide shows the general fund subsidy for all of these programs in the current fiscal year. Revenues from fees, grants, sponsorships, and donations also support these programs, as I mentioned earlier. With limited funds, increasing operational costs, and new assets at the Concord property coming online in the next year, we will need to make some trade-off decisions when it comes to preparing our budget. So we want your input tonight on the allocation of program subsidies. Specifically, whether you recommend allocating resources differently among these programs than what is shown here. So it's not a blank slate. And Jessica, I'm going to ask that you increase the slide size so that we can see some of those percentages.
The aquatic park is 16 and the rest are about 28.
Yeah, so, can everybody see that? Okay, so you can see those percentages. So those are the existing allocations of general fund subsidies. So what I mean by subsidy is that the money that we take in for like camp registration doesn't fully cover the cost of camp. The aquatic park, a visit here does not fully cover the cost of the staff and the chlorine and the utilities, et cetera. So we have to subsidize those programs, and that's not a negative position to be in, but we do have limited resources, so the way that we allocate those subsidies matters because it changes how we serve the community.
Go ahead, Mark.
So I know there has been some discussion, not official, about older adult services and whether we should be in the business of providing social services. I guess my only opinion is that you serve the people where they come and they come to our facilities. And so I feel that it's very important to provide the services that we currently do at the Milwaukee Center and elsewhere for older adult services. So I wouldn't like to see that reduced. I think some of the others, it appears to me that you guys do a lot of work to figure out how to make a dollar go as far as you can. So I don't really have any input on the others.
Mark, are you, just so that I can get clarity on this topic of social services, are you suggesting that we keep the current subsidy for those services at Milwaukee Community Center, but we take a look at the in-home social services that we're providing? and some of the services external to the Milwaukee Center.
I think in total, I think it would be good just to maintain what you're currently doing. Yeah, both the Milwaukee Center, I think that's where a majority of it is, but there's others beyond that. I think that when the Concord Center comes up, that's gonna be a slow. Is my assumption, right? I mean, that we're not gonna have duplicate centers at Concord that we have in Milwaukee Center. There's not staff or we don't even know what the need is, right? So if that makes sense, I mean, that.
Well,
you're
we will
gonna-
need to activate Concord, so that's one of the key
Yes.
reasons why I'm asking you all tonight, because the plan is to have a portion of the community center building renovated and ready for use for community center uses. So we do need to look at Concord to and we do need to allocate some resources for activation of that building. So that's why I'm checking in on priorities tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Beatty.
I guess I would like to have a better understanding, and not a question I think you can answer tonight, but about why the adult social services are funded out of parks and not the county social services offices, and is that true in other parks districts? Or how are other senior centers that provide these kind of services funded? Yeah, I'd just like to have a better understanding of that all the way around.
Okay, that's a great topic. The short answer is it's not typical to the degree that we are at Milwaukee Community Center. But to be fair to the topic, we will prepare a briefing for you.
Thank you, Joel.
I'm kind of on the heels of that. I think it's important to also note that like Meals on Wheels specifically is not a solely funded project through NCPRD. There's my understanding, and I know it's complicated, but there's quite a collaboration of federal grants and other things, other resources that are being drawn to make these services actually happen. So this isn't just on NCPRD's dime.
Yes, yes.
And I think that's really important to note, because I certainly don't think any of those, obviously a little biased, but that those services should be cut, particularly given the members of our district that they serve. But yeah, I mean, it just makes sense to me, I suppose. I don't see, I would hate to see anything sacrificed for a lack of understanding. So perhaps some more clarity on the actual funding mechanisms would be helpful for people to understand.
So happy to do that. And also, I want to be really sensitive to the concerns that this whole discussion might raise within the community. And to be clear that there will be a lot of thoughtfulness put into this approach. This is not the optimal approach would be to find partners and partnerships so that services are continue and maybe there's a different way to do things that reduces the amount of NCPRD subsidy. So I want to be really clear that tonight, I'm not suggesting that we are cutting older adult services. It's just in a landscape of limited resources. What are your priorities to maintain? And so I appreciate you sharing this feedback with me.
Thank you. I believe it was Grover.
Yeah, I actually want to build on what I've been hearing here, all three of those questions. It is important for me to look at what are the costs what other funds are being used, and then what does that leave NCPRD paying? So we would have a sense of how much that really is, like how much is Meals on Wheels, not anyway trying to cut it or anything, but how much of it is actually paid for by other funding sources, and then how much is, and all the other programs. And then I'm very concerned about what work is being done as we sit here now to look at what is the coordination as far as a district dealing with two community centers. Geographically, the Concord is surrounded by 50,000 people in its immediate area. And Milwaukee is got probably another 50,000 over in that immediate area. So how is the integration, the offering of services, et cetera, going to be adjusted or factored, looking at what's being used? And then lastly, in that same phase, I'm curious about how much of the county services, case in point, I know that people complain about to go to county to go and talk to a counselor or therapist or what. It's 2 transfers on a bus. It's like a 2-hour trip up and a 2-hour trip back. Whereas you can bring a staff person down on Wednesdays, and I brought this to library boards a long time ago. You could have office hours on Tuesdays at Concord and on Thursdays at Milwaukee, et cetera, to be able to make services more available for the county, for the school system, for all the other things that need to be more integrated. So that's the part I want to speak to. But I do hope to get some better numbers and know what the coordination plans are.
I was just gonna ask for,
Director Sakas?
Yeah, there was an earlier question regarding, can the county do more financially for social services? And so I've asked that question several times over the years. And as I understand it, what's eligible, because Health and Human Services operates on state and federal funding, that we providing the maximum amount of services and support that we can legally. So that's what I do know, but I do support getting answers to all those questions and have a more clear understanding.
Yeah, it'd be nice to know what, Oregon City has
Oh, that too.
an older adult center, Gladstone does, Lake Oswego does. How are they, are they also funding it out of parks, or are they somehow piecing the money together?
city resources.
Yeah, the homework I've done, I forgot to respond to that. Thank you for the reminder. So I did some research, and this is the only park district that's actually doing what it's doing in the state that I'm aware of. Meals on Wheels, if you look at all the Meals on Wheels, they're separated from counties for the most part. Most of the adult centers are ran by cities. So Gladstone, Lake Oswego, I think Lake Oswego uses their parks apportionment to help fund their adult center, I believe. I think Westland's a little bit different, but adult centers are typically funded by the cities, and their money is more fungible. It's their general fund.
Thank you. Sheila?
Well, I'm really proud of the work that North Carolina's Parks and Rec does, with the Milwaukee Center and what it's done over the years. My question is, so the program funding, this that you have here, is that all coming out of the general fund?
So this is the allocation of program subsidies, so this is the percentage of program budget, as you can see in the notation there, that's not funded by fees, donations, or grants, so yes.
And so is this, so when I look at my general fund expenditures, and I don't know what page that's on, so what piece of the pie, is this all the transfers in materials and services? Is
No.
this 50%,
No,
okay, but is that where it would be coming out?
Community centers.
yeah, so this is, so it's under community centers, if you go to you're talking about the lines of business.
Well, I was looking at this general fund. grant.
Yeah, so it doesn't correlate perfectly, I don't know. Correlate
But
to the
it's-
lines of business for community centers and recreation.
Okay,
I think it's in that pie that shows.
Yeah.
The whole.
So in your, Daniel has it pulled up here, go to your packet with the header general fund resources.
okay,
And that's where you actually see programs in community center. And then there are older adult services there as well.
right, but I don't.
I'm not sure I answered,
Yeah,
answered your
and I
question.
guess, on that page, I'm confused about where these things come from. Does this chart correlate with this graph?
Not directly.
Okay,
And so, yeah, I would take this slide in isolation. This is really just focused on these areas noted, older adult services, recreation, sports, and the aquatic park. So when we think about the recreation services budget, these are the parts, if you will. And then and then the percentages that you see allocated to each slice in the pie, if you will, that's the percentage that's allocated to as a subsidy.
So my feedback, it's kind of nice the way that the sports, recreation and older adults. There's an equitable distribution between those three. And I find that positive.
I'm gonna call on myself for two things. One is feedback on the parts of our budget that are subsidized essentially by the general fund. The ones I think are most crucial to me personally are the adaptive and inclusive sports and swim lessons, because we live near a couple bodies of water, and that's a safety aspect. I think all folks should learn how to swim, ideally. The one I would prefer not to subsidize if we had to make a hard choice is the travel, trips and bus services. That's probably controversial because rides are so crucial, but we do have paratransit. There's a whole federal transportation administration that I don't completely understand, but we're Parks and Rec. And then the next one is, Mark, thank you for pointing out, we are well over time. So I want to sort of put it out there. Do we need to close up the meeting after this topic, or are we looking to try to finish all of the business on the agenda or something different?
We'd like to get to the letter of support. I'd like to have a DAC liaison selected, not in that order per se. And what's the other item of
You had some
business?
other. Did we lose a member? There's something on the agenda about a replacement.
Yeah, we don't have to do that unless the DAC wants to prioritize that. And then I have my director report, which I can walk through pretty quickly.
So we need to extend.
I was going to extend the meeting to, I don't know.
I second that.
What would be necessary as far as time frame? 30
Okay.
minutes.
So we're at 7:14. It sounds like there's a proposal to extend 30 minutes. It was seconded, I believe. And any objections? Otherwise, we'll keep rolling.
So if there aren't any more comments about the program subsidies, then I respectfully request that the DAC select a liaison to the budget committee.
And I asked if there are any volunteers.
Well, to ask a question, so this is not a volunteering question. What a clarification. Time commitment wise, this is obviously then just essentially attending the budget committee meetings.
Correct.
And then reports will be integrated into our normal agenda, correct?
Correct.
So it's not a very heavy lift, except come May, June. when there's
When it actually-
Yeah.
And you're a liaison, so you don't have to attend the meeting late May. There would be a meeting early May, although that I think is a joint, let me go to my list here. New process, I need to check my new process.
It was volunteering.
That was a question to clarify for the board, to not for me necessarily, but I'm sure everyone, I'm sure the volunteer is curious.
Bit of marketing here, so it would just
I'd like
really be
Paul.
two meetings that the liaison needs to attend outside of the DAC meetings.
And when would those two meetings be?
One would be next Thursday, and then one is TBD in February.
Well, I would be willing to attend those.
Thank you, Sheila.
Possibly.
Okay. Thank you, my work is done.
So do we need to nominate Sheila and then vote on that? Is that?
I think the applause was.
Yeah, that was a unanimous yay.
I think it was all sides.
Okay,
Hearing no objection.
Thank you for being willing, Sheila.
Yeah, thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Okay. Our next, thank you for the robust discussion. Our next item is the park at Jennings Lodge, campus. Excuse me, the campus itself, the park will be there. Grant letter of support, thank you, Alex Gilbert. It's about to do a spoonerism.
No worries. Hi, I'm gonna try to be quick. Thank you for allowing some extra time for this. I think it's really important. Again, my name is Alex Gilbertson, Principal Planner with NCPRD. And you may remember back in May, I presented an update on the engagement and design process for the park at Jennings Lodge campus. Since that time, we have completed schematic design, design development, and we submitted our type 2 design review to county planning at the end of October. So that design review process is probably gonna take about 8 weeks or so, and once that design review is issued, we would then begin developing construction documents, the detailing needed, developing the technical specifications, refining the cost estimate, et cetera. The design process is, we're hoping to have that complete by summer of 25. So I'm just gonna play a quick little video, the 1:23. Oh, it's lagging. Well, hopefully this can spark some excitement about the design. I am happy to report that this is a direct reflection from the feedback and input that we did receive through the community engagement process. So we are working to assemble a funding package for construction. If construction funding is available, construction would begin in the spring of 2026. And what that funding package is going to consist of is applying for up to 5, we're looking at 5 grants for to obtain that funding. And also an application to request a portion of the allocated NCPRD local share dollars from Metro. But a way to help us boost those applications is with some letters of support. So I do have a signed letter of support from the Oregon City School District. And tonight I'm here to ask for a blanket letter of support from the DAC for this project. And then following this DAC meeting, I would also like to request a letter of support from the Jennings Lodge CPO as well. So that being said, this blanket letter of support, it's included in your packet. This would be a letter of support that we sort of use to incorporate into the various different grant applications that we would be applying for. And then I'll just add, I know you all know this, but district resources are limited, especially for construction. And I am doing what I can to help ensure that we are seeking funding external funding to help us get this park built. So design is moving along lovely in a really nice progressive way. And so we just need to make sure that we can get the funding to build it. And that's it. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer anything.
Actually, is that video available somewhere on county website somewhere?
Not yet. We will, I'm hoping to get it posted on our social media channels soon, but it's something that we can email out. Actually, it's a large file. I could probably share it here or something, yeah.
But you have a planning page for this project on the website, so you'll eventually.
We will upload it, yeah.
that's-
Because this video is a little bit different from the one I showed in May. It's been more tailored to the actual design, so, yeah.
Alex, just be doubly clear, on the right page. The blanket language is included in our packet, and that's what you're asking us to approve
Yes.
for the DAC
That's
letter, correct? Okay,
It does have an address for a DLCD grant that will change per application that it gets
okay,
applied to.
fantastic. Sorry?
I know, back to funding, what's the projected cost of this park at the moment, and the IGA, was that for 25 years?
The IGA is for,
For the organization, with the
with
organization?
the school district is, currently for 20 years, but, working toward an amendment to make it 25 years so that it'll become eligible for state funding. The projected cost for the construction is 2.5 million. 2.5. If it was 25 million, that would be a different part.
It's like, working.
I do have expensive taste, but not.
Okay. So, at this point, I'm chair, so I'm supportive of the letter. It has my name on it, but I'll entertain a motion if we would like to support this letter as drafted.
I move that we support the letter, the blanket letter for use in grant applications for the park at Jenny's Lodge.
Second. Second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, let's go to a vote, excuse me. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion passes. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks.
for hustling for us. Oh, that's me. I have the next topic, which is DAC representative replacement. We had a recruitment for a sub-area representative who has had several unexcused absences. And at this point, staff have done outreach to that person to ask if they're able to attend, if they're still interested in serving, and we've not heard a response back. So at this point, referring to our current bylaws, if there's a member with that many unexcused absences, we do need to I'm sorry, I lost the exact terminology. We need to remove them from this board and open up a position to someone who can participate. So at this point, we will, so what I'm bringing before the board is that we will need to remove Salma Nasir. And it's with regret that I bring this up. I was looking forward to their contributions, and I hope they're doing well, however things are where they're at. And I apologize, Director Sally, an audible, please, and assist. Did we need to vote on this as a body, or is it administrative?
As long as it's in the minutes, then we will take it to the next step and get the process going. We've also been informed, because it has been a short amount of time between the recruitment and this proposed removal. We did have two other candidates that originally applied, that we do have the option to reach out to them. So staff is waiting for this process to take place, and then we would reach out to see if they're willing and able to fill this vacancy with the term date that started back when Salma was appointed. So this is kind of step one right now, but we're working with the county to make sure we do everything in the proper order.
Yeah, thank you for the help. So we did a very robust, like, there was a lot of effort in the recruitment process, and yes, I want to use that effort and ask those two folks if they're able to serve. Did you have a question, Joel?
Well, I'll just to clarify, because we actually have a similar thing going on with but so the term of the replacement would be for the original term, correct?
Right.
That way it wouldn't trigger re-recruitment, et cetera.
Okay,
And the bylaws say that we would then recommend to the board of directors, that they would terminate. That's what bylaws say.
That's what, once the DAC agrees that the bylaws have been violated, then we can continue to move it forward to get it eventually to the board and.
DAC may recommend termination of that appointment to the board of directors. That's the step we're looking
And I
at.
guess our hope is that maybe we can do a termination and an appointment at the same time, so it's just brought forward one time, so that's what we're hoping to do.
thank you. Echoing that hope, I'd like to get someone in the seat as soon as possible. Okay. Thank you. And then when we voted to extend time, we added
Need a
I'm sorry,
Oh,
I
I'm
wasn't,
sorry.
I wasn't clear yet. I mean, do we need that emotion to, okay, so it's just, it's brought up in the minutes, that's enough for you all to go talk to. Cool.
Okay. We will use our guiding documents to guide us. We added time, which was 30 minutes. That takes us to 7:45. We still have items on our agenda that we could move through. We're at DAC member reports. Does anyone have a specific report they'd like to make for their sub area or their community center?
I'll make a quick one. Well, obviously, if you haven't already gotten your tickets for the Thanksgiving dinner, please do so. There's also an opportunity to purchase a meal. All the proceeds support the Meals on Wheels program. But also wanted to remind people that the firewood and energy assistance programs that happen at the Milwaukee Community Center are going on. So if anyone in your sub area uses firewood as their primary source of heating or needs there, I know there's an energy assistance program that they can at least use the staff at Milwaukee Community Center to apply for. I think it's federally, maybe it's county, I don't remember, but there's funds available too to pay heating bills, for example. So please let people in your sub area know that are vulnerable to those needs.
Thank you. Mayor Davey?
Yeah, Milwaukee had 3 parks that were building with ARPA money, and the hope was that they would open in October, but actually none of them actually opened in October. And one of them is having some construction difficulties. The Balfour Park, which is over near Providence, Milwaukee, probably won't open until early in 2025, but the Bowman Bray and Scott Parks will open in December, and hopefully December 7th is our umbrella parade in downtown Milwaukee, which is a popular event, and then we do tree lighting. And we're definitely hoping that Scott Park, which is the park next to the library, will be open and ready for that event on December 7th. So come to downtown Milwaukee on Saturday, December 7th, to decorate an umbrella.
I work in construction, none of that surprises me. Thank you. Okay, so we'll, if it's okay, we'll go on to the district report.
Okay.
Thank you,
All right.
Director.
Thank you. So at the last DAC meeting, concern was expressed about the canceling of the Milwaukee Community Center Connections newsletter. I just want to be clear that the publication's not being canceled. The length of the publication will soon be reduced from 32 to 12 pages to help lower NCPRD funded production costs. And more importantly, because the full discovery guide with all of our program offerings will return next year. So that's a pretty exciting development. I also want to thank the Milwaukee Community Center Foundation for funding the printing of the newsletter. So that's a partnership that we have.
Can I ask a quick question? I'm sorry. Do you know that when that is projected to start, the actual reduction in printing? I know it was initially,
the discovery guide?
yeah, I thought it was initially gonna be, seemed like it was delayed.
Connections.
For connections.
Oh, our transition is going to be in spring.
Okay,
Spring,
right,
summer.
perfect.
So we have our next one will be out in January. It's already,
But I believe that'll be normal,
that's regular.
what it's currently at.
Yeah, and then the next one
That's what I was curious about.
will probably be an actual delay. It'll probably come out, April.
Terrific, thank you.
We've recently identified a need to remind our customers, volunteers, contractors, vendors, and partners that NCPRD has a zero tolerance policy for harassment. So we're going to actually post this language, I'll read it to you, at all NCPRD facilities, and again, everyone's required to comply. So, and you all are our eyes and ears at our parks and facilities, so please spread the word. And the language is North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District provides a work environment free of discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. We create and maintain a respectful and professional environment in which each person's valued and respected regardless of differences or background. This language is consistent with the county's language, so this is not NCPRD specific language, but we are going to be posting it at all of our facilities to again, help remind everyone that everyone needs to comply, not just our staff. So I have a series of updates about capital projects and I'll speed through those. A change order for the Concord property projects will be considered by the board this month for playground equipment installation, road construction, and roof and fire suppression related improvements for the renovated community center. No additional funds are required for this project. A construction tour for DAC and task force members has been scheduled. Hopefully you all have received an invite. If you have not, please let NCPRD staffer know and we'll make sure you get one. Please continue to visit our project website for updated project information and that construction cam, which is really cool. And we are still on track for a grand reopening next fall. This week, the board considered a lease extension of 2 years with a 1-year option to extend for our NCPRD maintenance shop lease. And so tomorrow I'll be going back to the business meeting for that final approval. This week, the board is also considering a permanent utility easement over a portion of the trolley trail for the Boardman Sewer Improvement Project. Construction is planned for spring of 2025, and the work is not expected to disturb the surface of the trolley trail. We expected that the Oak Lodge Water Services will actually bore under the trail to install that new sewer line. So we meaning NCPRD will be issuing a special use permit. And so we'll make sure that trolley trail users are well informed, it's safe, and we'll make sure that if they do in fact need to disturb that paved surface, that we have a paving specification. But again, you all are our eyes and ears, so let us know if there's something going on that is concerning. Also this month, and this is aligned with the item that Alex brought, staff will bring the first of a series of grant applications to the board for review and approval to help fund the construction of the park at the Jennings Lodge campus. And I want to acknowledge Alex for this work that she's doing to develop a really comprehensive funding strategy. The idea is that, or the goal is that we're going to use very little capital funding from the NCPRD resources, and that we're really going to lean heavily into some new grant resources to fund construction. This has taken a considerable amount of time, and this is not a requirement. Alex has taken on this initiative herself. So I really want to recognize her and applaud her for this excellent work. In December, the board will consider a revised IGA with the Oregon City School District for that additional 5 years to give us 25 years of an agreement on that property for the park so that we can again get one of those state grants. Tomorrow, a revised IGA will go before the board for the sale of the NCPRD owned former Clackamas Elementary School property. And I want to let you know that this is actually a fairly minor change to the IGA. What it does is it removes the clause that would allow for that property to come back to NCPRD if the rezoning of the property by the county was not successful. So I actually think that this is good for NCPRD because it allows us to utilize those funds right away instead of having to sequester them until that rezoning is completed. So, and as per usual for all board actions, the DAC will be notified in advance of the board actions. This one is fast-tracked. It complies with public noticing requirements because it's a revision to the IGA. all of those other actions that I noticed, I notified you of, go through the typical process where we notify you a week in advance. So look for those emails from Jessica, and that will tell you when to check the county website or the NCPRD website for those staff reports. I want to note that for recreation, winter program registration opens up on December 3rd at noon for district residents. The winter celebration is December 7th at the Milwaukee Community Center. And as Joel said, the traditional Thanksgiving dinner is at the Milwaukee Community Center on Sunday, November 24th. Here at the aquatic park, hot tub repairs are underway and the hot tub is expected to reopen in December. And we included the Q1 financials for the district in your packet for this month. I'll work with Jeanette, and if there is interest in actually having that item discussed in more detail at the January DAC, we'll be prepared to do that. Because again, we don't expect to have a December DAC meeting. Also, it's come to my attention that there are some community concerns about about yellow flag iris on NCPRD owned property. We are looking into this right now. This is an invasive plant. And so we're taking a look at that right now to determine whether this invasive plant is on our property. We're not able to remove it on private property, but most certainly we will on our property. And I also want to just mention that we have a management kind of plan for invasive species. There are quite a number of them. And so we tackle them at different times of year in different ways. Staff update last is Kevin Mason is officially retiring next Monday, November 18th. He is going to return part-time on a temporary basis for a very short duration to help with the leadership transition. As you can well imagine, after so much time at NCPRD, he has a lot of good stuff still in his brain that we would like to access. So I want to thank him for returning for that short time. We'll have a full celebration of his retirement when he officially leaves the organization next spring. And I also want to thank Deputy Director Dominic Fortinas for stepping up to lead the Parks and Facilities team. So this is a new part of his portfolio. And I really am pleased that he's willing to take on this challenge. So thank you. That's it for me.
Mr.
The $3,500,000 for the sale of the property, is that earmarked for anything? I know, again, back to full circle, back I'm complaining about money again, I know.
You're not complaining.
Yeah, commenting about it. So is it set
So-
for some funds?
So under the guidance of Director Savas, we have allocated those resources along with the Wichita property sale resources and put them into a program fund. I'm going to use my lingo, not accounting, because it makes more sense to me. Into one line item for property acquisition.
Okay,
So they're not going to be used to pay for utilities or pay for things outside of acquiring property. And so I just want to thank and give credit to Director Savas for doing that.
Yeah, I appreciate all the positive feedback for those of you who were aware of it and supported that. So seeing that we were to lose properties, that we ought to have funds to recover those properties, knowing we are park deficient in many areas, but the county, so, or the district.
so the totals, I think that was another $1 million set aside from the Wichita Center. Now I'm going
2.8.
2.8.
2.375.
Okay, thank you.
So
How much do we have then?
Good to know.
Almost 6.
Yeah. So
yeah. Pretty robust funds.
Thank you. That brings us to our public comment period, but I don't see any community folks in the room, and I don't think there's anyone Zoom. So we will omit that from the meeting today. Thank you all for being here. We will adjourn.
Thank you.
We'll see you in January.
Happy New Year.
yeah, have a good holiday.